Good morning, everyone. So, today we'll be discussing a couple of issues which are in news yesterday, and I felt that they needed some more time, and that's the reason we are taking it as a separate, complete issue. One is about the new rules where the SEZ rules, Special Economic Zone rules, were amended, and then day before yesterday we were talking about the food safety and security, right? So both these issues will be taking up as comprehensive coverage. I'm expecting some questions on this special economic zone this year, and that's the reason I'm discussing this as a separate issue. So let's begin. Today's first issue is special economic zones in India. Okay, let's understand what are special economic zones, why are they created, what is their relevance, first from GS3 angle, and then I will extend it to other areas as well. Let's begin. Firstly, what is a special economic zone? It's a geographical cluster. Okay, it's a piece of land. That land is given to some companies for a specific purpose, and that specific purpose historically was to export goods. In our GDP formula, C plus I plus G plus net trade, this export part, if it is more, is contributing to GDP growth, right? It is in this context we have the special economic zones. It's a real estate piece, but it is treated as a different entity. It's almost like a foreign entity within our country, only for economic purposes. Ultimately, government will have the control, but all the rules and regulations, taxation, compliance measures, audits, everything will be different from the domestic area. So let's say if this is the total land available in India, there will be small clusters which are treated like special economic zones. Okay, this is the overall concept. There are three facets to this. One, it is treated as a foreign territory because a small land which is notified through an act called the SEZ Act of 2006 will treat this demarcated area as per this SEZ Act differently from the other areas like this. This is the outside area, and this is usually called domestic tariff area. Please note this term. Okay, that is point number one. Here you will have certain custom benefits. Basically, anything that enter into that area, any goods that enter into, for example, you import any raw materials from elsewhere and bring it into that area, you don't have to pay additional duties. Okay, there will be some special concession for bringing raw materials into that because they create wealth for this nation by exporting. There should be some incentive, right? So special economic zone is like an incentive structure to improve exports. But there are some problems with how we are addressing our special economic zones. So there will be business incentives like tax benefits, faster clearances through single window clearances. There will be a lot of priorities given for companies in those special economic zones, and they are expected to have easier compliance. Basically, special economic zone, three facets: foreign territory, custom benefits, and business incentives, all aligned for exports. Clear? Do you understand the concept of special economic zone? Great, let's move forward. Now, if you take a look at the timeline, way back in 60s, 70s, 80s, from then we've had this idea that we have to emulate how China was actually growing. So there was an idea where we have to create a small cluster called export processing zones, wherein you will give a small piece of a land to a set of companies or a specific sector help them produce goods and send it out of the country for foreign exchange. This is the idea. But it did not take off because of many other factors which are not relevant right now. So if you take a look at the Special Economic Zone timeline, you will see that SEZ Act and the rules were almost formalized from 2005-2006, almost 20 years ago. Today we have as many as 276 special economic zones, but the sad reality is only 60% of them are operational, and even the rest 40% are completely underperforming. Why is that? Despite giving everything that giving everything required for a business, why are we not able to leverage this special economic zones? This is what you need to understand. Okay? So let's understand, as structural challenges existed always, let's understand those challenges first. Structural challenge and how special economic zone was treated as a response. Structural challenge for Indian manufacturing and export-led growth. Firstly, the transaction costs are very high. The other day when we were discussing about the logistics sector, we discussed that India's logistics sector cost is almost 14% of our GDP when compared to developed nations where it was just 7 to 8%. So it's almost double. On the top of this, corruption. Corruption at every stage. What are the factors of production? Land, labor, capital, enterprise. Okay? Land clearance. It is a state subject. That is a big problem. There are no land records properly. A lot of litigation. Then labor. We do not have skilled labor. Capital. It is not easy to get capital access back then. Enterprise. Even if you have a great idea, you do not have an R&D setup here. That R&D setup was not supported by the government. So, as a result, there were slow export processes, poor global competitiveness, and low job creation. All of these are structural problems of our economy and how jobs were created. We thought SEZ will solve all these problems, but it did not. Why? How it will solve? Because, take a look at it. For the high transaction costs, land is so expensive in this country. When you are giving it at a subsidized rate, you are reducing the cost. Infrastructure is given. On the top of it, I'm also giving a tax relief. And yet, it did not take off. Slow export processes. For that, I said I will give you a single window clearance. You don't have to run to electricity department, labor department, etc., etc. I told you, right? Land is a state subject. So you will have to coordinate between center and state and get multiple clearances from multiple departments, which is almost like a harassment for entrepreneurs. Okay. Clear? Now, to solve that problem, I gave you a single window clearance. Problem solved. Poor global competitiveness. See, usually these special economic zones were created near export infrastructure. Meaning, let's say you have a port, Kandla port for example. The special economic zone where exports were the major focus, they were created near that ports, and yet something did not click. Why? Let's see. We thought that special economic zones will solve the problem of low job creation by attracting a lot of investments. Having said that, the reality is 60% of the SEZs are lying unutilized. Something must have gone wrong. Let's see. So, but before that, why special economic zones didn't work out, you should understand definitely. But at the end of the day, you can understand that there is no single reason as to why different special economic zones didn't work out. When I say different, you should know the types, right? Let's see the type of special economic zones in the country. There are many more, but these are the major ones. Most of the special economic zones today are related to IT. Okay? Meaning you have IT companies, IT parks. For example, in Hyderabad, Gachibowli area. Once upon a time, this DLF, that entire area you see, right? It was under a special economic zone. So let's see. Once you understand this, you will understand how different special economic zones have different problems. First one, multi-product special economic zones, meaning, let's say you have a real estate place. Okay, in that cluster, you will have IT companies, manufacturing companies, you will have finance companies, you will have some other companies. Okay, so all of this together can leverage their mutual advantages. For example, if I have to talk about fintech industry, okay, fintech industry, I would say this is a 3-parent baby. Fintech industry is like a 3-parent baby. How it is a baby of finance sector, technology sector, plus an intervention from the government side of JAM Trinity, Jandhan Aadhar Mobile. Okay, so you can use analogies like this to express and communicate how, metaphorically, this is a 3-parent baby. Okay, anyway, coming back to the topic. So you're talking about multi-product special economic zones. For example, you take the case of a fintech sector. Multiple companies existing together should leverage and converge their energies to help evolving sectors like fintech. Sadly, that didn't happen because there is a skewed, bias towards one set of companies, and that piece of real estate did not have enough infrastructure for the other part. For example, finance sector required one kind of a setup. You need as far as technology is concerned, you needed a different kind of a setup, and you need to plan for it. Just leaving a piece of real estate and asking the companies to figure it out is not going to be good enough for actually creating this vision of multi-product special economic zones. So that is the reason a simple real estate place is not good enough, because let's say a IT company applies for it, they get a approval, and a IT infrastructure or just an office is built. You don't require much infrastructure for an IT company. You just build a very good building, put a cabin there. Is as good as constructing a study hall, just a work cabin, right? But that's not how it works when it comes to let's say an industry where you require IoT, Internet of Things. So things like this, which were ill planned, did not help us in creating this multi-product special economic zones. Then you have sector specific zones. Let's say, okay, we don't want to create this multi-product zones because too much of an headache for the government. So they just let's say we decided to go for sector specific, meaning all the automobile companies will manufacture at one place, Aero Hub one place, IT one place. But just giving land again is not good enough. There should be peripheral support from the government in terms of ensuring there is a skilled workforce there. If you're giving a special economic zone for a manufacturing sector far away from the city, skilled professionals should be okay to move out of their comfort zone and come to a place which is very remotely located. Okay, so you need to have the supporting infrastructure for a quality life there. Sometimes that might be missing, which didn't support. So if you want to really leverage the local economies, you have to the local governments should also ensure policies which are conducive for local hiring. And just because the government is making a policy is not good enough. The people who in that area should be skilled enough to be a part of that special economic zones. So that planning should be considered. So you have something called locational factors in geography. Policy becomes very important for leveraging the location also. GS1 link. Okay, then you have free trade zones where trade facilitation is the focus. Meaning, see, this is the uh, first free export oriented zone, Kandla. Okay, before 1991 liberalization itself. Okay, but it did not take off. Trade facilitation means the kind of documentation you need to carry out to send a product out of the country. It might be your customs clearance, tax compliances, other norms. Let's say, for example, you are exporting some marine product, food product, which will have a very low shelf life. Okay, so the company or the consumer in say UK, they expect a sanitation certificate or food safety certificate. This zone should have all those facilities, and it might not be cost effective for an exporter sometimes. So just having an intent is not good enough for action. I mean, for an outcome, you need to have an actionable agenda, frameworks, supporting infrastructure, which was kind of absent from special economic zones. Then you have the financial SEZs. For example, you have this gift city. This is one area which is probably going to click well, because just like IT sector, fintech is one evolving sector which requires just knowledge as the capital. So knowledge based economy SEZs do relatively well in this country because people are okay to travel out of the comfort zone. Let's say usually in IT sector, people are okay to move between Noida, Gurgaon, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune in search of an opportunity, because there is kind of similar level of quality of life. Provided there is no opportunity in the area of their residence, they're still okay to move out. But do you really think people are okay to move out from, let's say, a IT culture kind of a hub, like let's say for example Hyderabad, to let's say Nellore, which has Sri City, a manufacturing zone? People are not really okay with that. People preferences. So ideally, the companies that are manufacturing in that zone would prefer people from that local areas, provided there are skilled professionals there. So financial SEZs work well. So these are the various kinds of special economic zones. What works, what will not work, we have discussed. Moving forward. Recently, there is an amendment of the SEZ rules. And the context is that we are preparing our economy for the next leg of the industrial revolution, which is the AI revolution. IR 4.0. You know what is industrial revolution? It's about how technology transforms economy in various phases of our history. Now we are calling this present times as IR 4.0. So here is a homework. Go back and check what are the first three industrial revolutions and what did they do to this economy and society. Anyway, coming back. Special economic zones. What is the latest amendment? See, the amendment is in the context of IR 4.0 specifically because we are aiming these rules to address the problems of our semiconductor industry. Why semiconductor and electronics industry? Because the next phase of industrial revolution, that is the artificial intelligence revolution, the Web 3.0 revolution, predominantly a digital revolution, requires the supporting hardware. And India aims to be the hub of this AI revolution, hardware, semiconductors. Because we already have a leverage of skilled IT professionals. So India is predominantly a service sector economy where skill is the investment that people have. But in the phase of AI revolution, India faces a very big challenge that we have to transition towards a high skilled, high value, low volume economy. as of now, situations look like a number of jobs will be vanished if things are automated in the formal sector. Don't forget that 80% of India, 90% of India is in the informal sector. At least in the 10% formal sector, you need to know how to skill them, how to handle them. Otherwise, this is an impending job crisis. And it is in this context, India should be ready from all fronts. And therefore, one of the action taken to be ready for that is amending the special economic zone rules, so that the rules are now helpful for the semiconductor and electronic industry. What did we do? The first one, requirement of the minimum land required, requirement of land. First thing is that we reduce this minimum requirement from 50 acres to 10 acres, because special economic zones are those areas which are large land parcels, and we are aiming to create not big how do I put it, real estate led industries. Semiconductor industry and the fabrication industry is a high technology, low land required sector. It's more about your mind power or your skill and the R&D costs that go in, not much about the land. So why do you have to have a 50-acre minimum requirement? It doesn't make any sense. So we have reduced that. Okay. So there are two projects which you can quote as an example. One is about Micron in Gujarat, which is aiming to set up a semiconductor fabrication unit. There is another company called the Aquas Group in Karnataka, which is somewhere in Dharwad region, which is electronics based. So we are clubbing semiconductors and electronics as similar clusters because they don't have high land requirement. It is more about the skill aspect. So this is one factor. Next up, land norms. We have seen the new rule about land leasing. Previously, let's say if a small piece of land which is privately owned is given to, or it's mortgaged to government, that kind of land is not allowed as a special economic zone. Now the rule has been amended. Land leased to government agencies are now eligible because land is becoming scarce. It is difficult for governments to mobilize more and more fresh land. See, like we discussed, just giving a piece of land is not going to be good enough. It should be located near every other facility that is required for production, especially human beings. People are not okay to move far away from a comfortable life. So you need these manufacturing, especially the highly skilled professionals. They want a quality of life as well. So you can't put it near some random village just because land is available. That's the reason. Then old system, only paid transactions are counted. So there is something called NFE, net foreign exchange. Okay. Your export incentives were dependent on the amount of foreign exchange you bring. There is one organization called the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, which usually will not be applicable when you come into a special economic zone. Okay. This is a parallel entity. Special economic zone will have their own commissioners who will be calculating this net foreign exchange. The new rule says that we will allow samples. See, when you are importing a raw material, okay, that will be calculated as a cost, right? So if you want to reduce that, see, what is a traditional business? Let's say you bring 10 rupees worth of goods into this country. I have to send 100 rupees out. That is how businesses think. I'm just giving an example. And incentives are on the amount of profit you create. So if the government says, I'll give you 10% on profit. So 90%, 90 rupees is the profit here. I'll give you 9 rupees as a profit. But let's say these sectors are not like, you know, raw material dependent. They are R&D dependent. So when you're carrying out R&D, you need small samples also. There is a lot of failure rate in terms of samples. So let's say the sample is costing 1 rupee. Out of this 10 rupees, new sample is 1 rupee. Like that you will bring 10 samples, so the cost will get doubled. The 10 will be a wastage because they will fail the R&D tests. But since it is incurring an additional cost in the NFE exchange calculation, instead of getting 90 rupees profit, now you are only getting 80 rupees. So this 9 rupees incentive will become 8 rupees. Now I am saying in terms of rupees. You might be wondering, it's only 1 rupee, what's the big difference? But you are talking in terms of multitude of crores. That will make a difference. So we are changing the NFE rules also. Okay, that is the next thing. Next up, domestic sales. I told you, right, in a SEZ cluster, you have, you know, something called the domestic tariff area. Usually in the old system, if you are buying any sorry, you are not allowed to sell any finished goods in the domestic tariff area. Meaning, let's say you have a small area which is declared as SEZ in Hyderabad. The product that is coming out of that SEZ is only meant to go to a port and it is shipped out of the country. They're not allowed to be sold in this country. This is increasing export dependency for companies in SEZs to make profit. And since we don't have other supporting infrastructure like logistics, etc., it is becoming a huge pressure for these companies, and therefore they're just exiting this special economic zones. And this is one reason why it is not working out. So to reduce that pressure, we have removed this. Now domestic sales are also allowed. Now you might be wondering, if you are giving them incentives, if you are giving them special access, and they will be reducing the cost of production, so they can, let's say, for example, a biscuit packet which is being produced for 10 rupees and sold at a 15 rupees cost in the market is making a margin of 5 rupees. A company that is in the special economic zone might produce this for 5 rupees because they have special incentives and everything, and they might release this in the market for 8 rupees at 50% cost of the market. How will they survive, these companies? Because it's unfair for them, right? You get all the access and yet you are getting the benefits also. We don't get anything and we are suffering. There is a risk of crony capitalism. How do we fix this? So you are allowed to sell but pay tariff in such a way that the local companies, whatever benefits you are getting here, those will be proportionally set off, and you will bring price parity. You can't sell at 8 rupees, you can sell at competitively priced 15 rupees only. And therefore, your products are getting domestic access, government is getting revenue in exchange for the incentives that you are giving to these SEZs. This is the next set of rule. So you got the key objectives of a SEZ policy: export promotion, investment attraction, infrastructure development, and job creation. Okay, what are the, see, it's just a quick recap. You got the objectives, you know the incentives, you get duty benefits, tax benefits, financial access. So this is one change, one more change. Previously, only external commercial borrowing of 500 million was allowed for that complete SEZ. Now that kind of restriction is removed. You have a streamlined processes. See, single window clearance was available even before this. But the problem is, there were audits every 3 months. And when there is an audit, there is an inspection, then there is this possibility of harassment. That audit compliance is now eased. It is digitized or minimized. Human interface has reduced. So this will facilitate the companies to produce better. Now, despite all these rules and measures, did we fix the problems of operational cost? Because it is still, land is still expensive. Okay, you gave the land, you gave the electricity. Logistics, which is the biggest hurdle for any export driven company. Did we do anything significantly different? Not yet. It's a work in progress. We have projects like Bharatmala, Sagarmala, and all the infra projects which we'll be discussing in our GS3 infrastructure topic. Lands, apart from the land, you have this airports, ports, dry ports, inland container ports, warehouses, roadways, shipping ways, dedicated freight corridors, national, investment and manufacturing zones, NIMS. All this together will take some time. They're not something that will fall in place just like in 2 years or 3 years. These are heavy investments which will take time to materialize, but we are work in progress there. Till then, we have to focus on low infrastructure-led projects only. But we should move in that direction, right? So, this measure which is taken will again take time. But unless and until there is a follow-up to make things happen, we are going to come back to the same old process. Now, there is across the world, see, one of the reasons why companies move to different locations to come into the global value chains. Let's say a company, which is there in US, will move to a location like Ireland because the tax is very low there. If tax is, let's say, 10% here, in Ireland it is just 1 to 2%. So I will move to Ireland. Okay, this is not fair. I mean, for a person sitting in US, this will feel unfair. For a sitting in Ireland, this is market competition. So how about we create a global architecture where everybody comes up with a uniform tax rate? That uniform tax rate issue is a separate issue which we'll be discussing. In short, tax as an incentive will be minimized if this materializes. This is called the global minimum corporate tax, where US economy is having 10% and Ireland is having 1 to 2%, and countries like India are having 20%. Why all this headache? Let's have a common minimum tax so that tax as an incentive is removed, so that we focus on actual structural measures like skills, government policies which support R&D, so that there is efficiency. You might be wondering, if India is having 21% corporate tax and you're reducing it to 15% according to OECD, aren't we losing money? Yes, we are losing money, but you also remember that if you do other things right, skill your people well, keep them healthy, give them proper education, give them proper professional skills, India has the largest labor market. India is the youngest nation in the world, and this 5% difference can attract a lot of companies if other things are done right, if the policy is right, if the policy is conducive for growth. That is what we should be focusing on, and that's why OECD tax impact is also a very important issue that you need to consider in any economic policy going forward. Tax incentive can never be a permanent solution in a world that is moving away from tax incentives. Next up, World Trade Organization scrutiny. We have discussed that exports will be having some incentives in our country. Previously, we have had a scheme called MEIS. I asked you guys to go back and check this. Okay? This is replaced by schemes like ROTTEP. What is MEIS? What is ROTTEP? Ministry of Commerce through DGFT used to give this kind of export incentives. What is that? Go back and check. What is WTO? What are WTO issues? This is the homework you have today. Now you have schemes like PLI. One more thing you have to remember: production linked incentives. Production linked incentives, not export linked incentives. When you produce something, you get some incentive. Okay? So production linked incentives are those incentives which you get when you produce something, unlike export-led incentives which you will get only after exporting. Okay, so these export-led subsidies like MEIS, they were usually phased out. Even production-linked subsidies which are allowed right now, there are problematic issues there also, which we will be discussing later. Not relevant in this discussion. Okay, so these are the challenges that are still associated not just with SEZ but manufacturing as a whole. So you need to improve your port connectivity, make land acquisition easier through land digitization program, and then irregular and water power supply to these companies should be taken care by the coordination between the center and the state. Regulatory burden. See, you have repeated audits like we discussed, there are high compliance cost and multiple agency clearances despite single window promise. You put it on paper, but is it actually happening in reality? You need to check that as well. Regulatory compliance. Domestic access we have discussed, like the domestic tariff area. One more problem is the sectoral imbalance. Most of our IT companies are in the special economic zones when they don't actually need to be, but they are given an incentive in the initial days because service sector is responsible for nearly 55% of our GDP, and most of the service sector exports were coming from IT and IT-led export services. Okay. Environmental concerns. If you want to move away from IT companies, financial companies, you are bringing manufacturing zones, waste management zones. For all those kind of issues, you need to have a mandatory environmental impact assessment according to the latest notification, where you have to take care of the groundwater depletion area. Enforcement should be good enough. Industrial pollution norms by coordination between the pollution control boards at both center and state level. All of this should be streamlined, which is not yet there. Okay. It is in this context you have a committee called the Baba Kalyani committee, which came out in 2018, which said how should we change our SEZs in 2018. Okay, so this committee said that we have to begin by renaming the special economic zones as 3 E's, employment and economic enclaves, so that the very name itself indicates the intent, where domestic investment should also be clubbed for employment generation. Why make it only export led? Why not also focus on creating local employment and empowering people? Second aspect, there is this foreign exchange pressure, continuous exports. And when that is the prima facie, that is the focus of these companies, they are not focusing on the larger agenda. What is the larger agenda? Empower the local infrastructure, the ecosystem. If you're a manufacturing company, you should strive for excellence, not exports. Right? So, focus on your job. Exports should just be a part of your worry. It's not the only focus. So, if you take this pressure away from them and focus on a complete nurturing of these industries, they will evolve and eventually contribute better to the economy, and that is what the recommendation says. You have to de-link these companies and these units which are there in the special economic zones from this net foreign exchange requirement. This sector specific rules should be created. Don't apply or don't go with a one size fits all approach. IT SEZ need not comply with an SEZ having pharma. That will be like a harassment. Pharma, why should an IT company carry out the same level of environmental impact assessment? Sometimes there is no need of uniformity. Prepare sector specific rules. Digital integration. Unified portal to enhance ease of business. It's easy to tell, but enforcement on a ground level is lacking because of multiple stakeholders getting involved. So in a digital India era, you need to digitize it with minimal human intervention. I'm not saying no human intervention, minimal human intervention. So finally, there is something called the Desh Bill. Desh. This is almost 3 years old. It has still not seen the light. So maybe if this comes out again, we will see this issue, but I'm not going into depth here. When you're preparing your notes on this issue, just leave some space, because this warrants a completely different approach. We discussed how we have to permit the domestic tariff area access, and finally redesign incentives so that jobs and employment becomes the priority, the quality of life becomes the priority. So this is the entire issue of special economic zones. Anything that you want will be covered in this area. So this, how should you link to GS1? Geographical factors, spatial planning. So establish special economic zones across the country in tandem with the existing industries. For example, Gujarat has pharma and textiles. So sector specific SEZs that can leverage this should be there. Hyderabad has pharma SEZ. So your NIMS, Zahirabad, for example, okay, should be connected to this pharma SEZs, so that there is an amplification. Okay, then you need to have let's say semiconductors and electronic manufacturing hubs near clusters of high R&D growth. For example, you have IIT Hyderabad, which has state-of-the-art R&D facilities. So by locating these special economic zones, which are focusing on this IoT, semiconductors, electronics research base, nearer to these educational hubs, there is a collaboration between the industry and the academia. And you club it up with, let's say, a program like Atal Innovation Hubs. Let Niti Aayog also become a stakeholder, and that's how the amplification happens. This is my addition, my suggestion, need not be the case. So this will enforce regional balance. That will change the structure of the society. That will change the economic system and also the quality of life. Treat this predominantly as an economic issue, but try and link it to the spatial planning and regional planning also. Clear? Okay. Now, let's come to the second issue of the food safety. I'll briefly and quickly finish this because it's very commonsensical issue. I am just covering the points that you need to have in your mains answers and prelims points. Like, I'm not going in depth of the concept behind this. It's just like a list of facts that you need to know to support your arguments and how to present your answer. So firstly, why are we carrying out food safety? Because according to the studies, nearly 55% of Indian population do not have access to affordable, safe food. Okay, that's the first imperative. Where will you find public health in DPSP? Where? Directive Principles of State Policy. Which article? Prelims. Anyone? Is there a mention of health somewhere in the Indian Constitution at all? Go and check. 47, exactly. So, ensuring quality health is a right under the definition of right to life, constitutional right. It's an implied right. It's not explicit, it's an implied right. Right to life includes safe food. But the problem is 55% can't access this. Accessibility challenge. To fix this governance gap, 55% of the population cannot address this need. There needs to be something done, right? So it is in this context, food safety bill or food safety as a governance issue came up. If you take a look at the evolution of the food safety framework, there are various phases. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. I'm dividing it for our sake of convenience. In the first phase, from 1954 to 2006, the entire issue of food adulteration, the food safety is confined to adulteration. What is adulteration? Whether a contaminant is intentionally added for profits. For example, contamination of milk, adulteration of milk for economic gains. That was the primary focus of food safety for almost a major part of our independent history. But when we say food safety, it is not just about contamination or malified intention by the manufacturers. There are many more evolving issues which comprise the definition of food safety. Today we have a lot more awareness. I mean, personally, it's not until last 5-6 years we started taking a look at our labels, or probably 10 years. The amount of protein content, the amount of fats on our food labels, we started becoming much more aware of what is right and what is wrong. Say, for example, if you are a vegetarian and your religious sentiments are hurt, you will see a green colored dot, which signifies that this food product is completely vegetarian. If there is a red color, all these enforcements on food labeling, how did they come into existence? It's because of FSSAI. Okay. From 2006 to 15, for almost a 10-year period, you have seen the establishment of SSAI and a transition from adulteration focused framework to science-based framework. Now, what do I mean by this science-based framework? Previously, nobody was talking about the amount of protein we should have. Nobody was talking about the amount of fats we should have. Okay, all these issues. Okay, now we are focusing on those areas. How much fat percentage? What kind of oil is being used? What are the problems of using this kind of food items? And post 2015, there is an alignment with global standards, which is important for our export incentives also. We have discussed this point already the other day. What is the FAO code called? The Global Level Food Safety Code. What is it called? We have discussed the other day. Codex Alimentarius. Codex. See, don't remember? Okay. Check this. Codex Alimentarius of FAO. And what is it? It's like the global norms on food safety. So what did FSSAI do? Firstly, it has set standards, then it created infrastructure for actually tracking the compliance. Then there is a network which connected all the food testing labs. Okay? And there are campaigns to educate the crowd, awareness campaigns. Broadly speaking, these are the focus areas for FSSAI. Why is it like this? When you take a look at any governance issue, it is not just about setting rules and leaving it on autopilot. It is actually seeing the outcome. A good governance framework is about seeing the outcome. What is the outcome of food safety? Safe access to food and therefore a healthy life. Even if there is a safe access to food, people should be made aware of their consumption patterns. We might be consuming because we are not aware, right? So we need to focus on this campaigns part also. What is the challenge here? We don't have science-based food labs, science-based governance. So we are moving away from adulteration as the focus, and now we are focusing on quality of life, because according to the definition of World Health Organization, you need to know the definition of health. So health is not just absence of disease. It is a state of well-being, both mental and physical. So food safety is a component of this physical safety for well-being of the population. So we need to move from a reactive measure to a proactive measure, and we require scientific evidence-based monitoring for that. The biggest problem of SSAI is that there are many outdated norms which are, completely rejected by the Western world, and we are still enforcing them because it is already proved that they are not scientific. The other day we were talking about MSG, monosodium glutamate. The entire Western world debated about this topic. If it is indeed true, how is the East Asian culture, Oriental culture, consuming it and not having any problem? There were genetical studies studied to know if that specific genetical aspects and the people in those cultures are having any propensity to use it and not be affected. Even that was debunked. So it was completely established that Ajinomoto or MSG, the company which produces, Japanese company which came up with this, has no ill effects, and yet there are debates even in the Indian scientific community about this. The debates based on opinions, not facts. I'm just giving a popular example. There are many other aspects like this. So we don't have a mechanism wherein the food safety standards are updated on a real-time basis. So there is a regulatory lag which will probably not be beneficial for people in this ecosystem. All the stakeholders, like the companies, are right to think about their profits. But if companies know that people are rejecting unhealthy foods and there is a dietary shift in the patterns, new companies are definitely going to emerge. See, we don't consume millets, for example, because most of them don't think they're tasty. Apparently, it's an acquired taste for a lot of people, which is not the case probably 75 years ago. It is a natural taste. I'm just giving a very simple example. So, what should be the amount of alpha toxins? We don't care about all these things. Usually, Indians, they don't really consider this as a big problem because there are very few cases or no cases at all where even in the long term your health got spoiled because of the presence of alpha toxins or such kind of things in our crops, even when we are using pesticides. Why are we discussing this right now? Because this is one issue where exports are rejected for our millets, especially the so-called organic products which have a very low shelf life. They get rejected here. So FSSAI is linked to our agricultural export policy also, not just health. So in these two areas, you are seeing a very big challenge. When your intent is to go through science, you cannot afford to have a scientific lag, which will lead to regulatory lag, which will lead to harassment of the companies. And actual focus is, when you're talking about food safety, 90% of the food and beverage industry is in the informal sector. How will you enforce standards there? That's a very big challenge that we need to address. So let's say, for example, there are misleading labels. There is a person, you can use people like this food farmer. He is an Instagram no influencer, or I would say de-influencer. This is a new term where de-influencers are discouraging commercial products because of science. Okay, so this risk communication is taken care. Finally, you have this INR system where you voluntarily say that, you know, these are the standards which are setting, but when you make it voluntary, it becomes the discretion of the companies. So this is a problem. Now, outdated regulations. I gave you the MSG example. There is regulatory inertia. There is no proactive interest from the side of the government to make this a priority. So informal sector exclusion. Let's say, for example, street vendors, they're not included. Self-help groups, they're not included. Cottage industry, not included. All this, when they don't scale, there is a amplification of the problem. If they don't scale, they don't come under the regulatory ambit. If they don't come under the regulatory ambit, they cannot be pushed into the exports zone. They cannot become export worthy. It's not export quality mal. And because of this reason, they are forced to become dwarfs. And this is the major problem of MSME industry, where majority of the food processing industry is. So this is how everything is linked. The role of the state is to push the the companies to grow and not maintain them as dwarfs, because it is easy. Yes, it requires a lot of effort from all the stakeholders, but we need to move in that direction if that's what the global economy dictates. Right. What are the emerging risks? Antimicrobial resistance. There are food products which can, not take into consideration the antimicrobial resistance. For example, dairy industry. When you are continuously feeding antibiotics to the milch cattle or the cows, what will happen is the milk that is coming out might be of a higher yield, but if there is some disease resistance because of continuous usage of antibiotics, we are risking a pandemic in animal husbandry sector. Not just that, even human beings can somehow acquire those antimicrobial resistance. Then there is this problem of GMOs. Okay, genetically modified organisms. That is not still under the ambit of FSSAI. It is still a part of GEAC. What is GEAC? I gave you a homework the other day. Please go back and check. And finally, climate change induced contamination. For example, climate change will make the weather much more moist in inappropriate times, which will lead to the growth of microorganisms, and therefore an example being alpha toxins, fungal growth on the food products, and the residues of those alpha toxins will remain in the product, which will lead to the rejection when conducted for food safety. I mean, when the samples are sent for food safety, they will be rejected. So when orders might get cancelled, which will lead to a huge wastage, and sometimes you might not have domestic demand for those kind of products. So this is an issue. Okay, but the problem here is that there is a significant increase in the processed food. Okay, this processed food industry is growing at a breakneck speed, and this is leading to a health challenge where we are moving. When you take health as a paradigm from communicable diseases to lifestyle diseases or non-communicable diseases, like let's say diabetes, heart strokes, BP, cancer, all this are linked to our lifestyle. So the health sector is also supposed to respond to this crisis. These are something that can be dealt at primary healthcare level only. These are issues that require intervention, not at primary healthcare. These are preventive in nature. There is no permanent cure for diabetes. It just can be managed through your lifestyle. And in that management, our choices play a very big role. And Indians have this deficiency gene because the previous generation starved and starved. Our genes have been modified according to the science. Before 1947, if you take a look at them, they're almost lean, very efficient for the kind of food that they're getting access to. But now take a look at how diabetes is becoming so common because of our dietary patterns. Even most of us are not aware of this. But until someone educates us, that change is very slow. So as a reason, what I'm trying to say is, our food safety is not just about contamination, it is also linked to the emerging health risks, and how health as a paradigm should completely change, because the biggest risk is not a pandemic. People die of heart attacks and diabetes more than the COVID pandemic every year. But it doesn't come into limelight, primarily because it is our own lifestyle that is causing this. Government is not held responsible for mismanaging it. There are some measures which I want you to take down. One is the food safety index. Just note down. Food safety index. Oh, what else is there? This is the revision. This is not needed. Okay. Yeah, these are the reforms that you need to consider. In terms of advertisement regulation, you have to link FSSAI to the Consumer Protection Act. You have to restrict celebrities who are promoting these unhealthy foods. A very viral video of actors and actresses, let's say for example Alia Bhatt. There is a famous viral clip where she was on Kapil Sharma show. It's a famous show in the north where she rejected a drink which contained high sugar, and parallelly she was promoting fruity or some soft drink, mango juice. If you take a look at that label, it has 80% sugar, which is very unsafe for young kids. This paradox cannot coexist. Recently, I'm giving this popular example so that it captures your imagination. Recently, another actress, Samantha, she was questioned. She recently started some podcasts. She was questioned as to why you are promoting this podcast when you have in the past actually promoted unhealthy soft drinks, snacks, etc. She went on record saying that she evolved as a person and now wants to be much more responsible and is not doing those endorsements anymore. So every person evolves. Celebrities will also evolve according to the time. But it is the responsibility of the state to enforce that change. Clear? So this is how you have to move forward with our FSSAI regulations and the whole concept of food safety. Clear? That's it for today. We'll meet you in the next class tomorrow.